Welcome back. I'm Jen, and this is The Pilot Principle, the podcast where I vehemently insist on judging a series by its pilot episode, while simultaneously being a massive hypocrite and wanting to give every series at least 3 episodes to see whether or not I want to watch it. However, I believe the pilot episode has a duty, and in this case, so do I. Today, we're looking at the first BBC One drama on The Pilot Principle, and we are turning up the heat on the pilot episode of Boiling Point. Here's the menu tonight. For hors d'oeuvres, the credits. I'll tell you who's who, the writer, director, cast, and a little bit of background information. For starters, I'll give you the pilot synopsis before outlining the first 10 minutes. Next, you have the mains characters and my favourite moment from the pilot episode. And then dessert will be sweet or sour. It's where you'll find out whether the pilot episode of Boiling Point has done enough to convince me to come back for seconds. Does that all make sense? You see, in my head I shouted yes, chef as a final pun, but I'm obviously alone here, so there was only silence. Here's what we're working with for Boiling Point. We've got a lazy pilot title. It's called Episode 1. I just like when things are given titles. I mean, nobody really remembers the titles, but I still think it's nice to have them. At one point, I'll have you know, I used to be able to recite every episode title from the animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender, so sometimes a pilot title is great. Episode length is 57 minutes, and you'll be getting no comment from me this episode on the running time. Episode 1. See, it's just not the same if you don't have a title. Episode 1 was written by James Cummings. He has also written the 2021 movie Boiling Point, which we'll come back to later on, as well as the 2023 movie Accused. Episode 1 was directed by Philip Barantini, a former actor whose feature directorial debut was the 2020 action movie Villain. For TV, he's also directed the final episode of the BBC One drama series The Responder, which was one of my favourite shows, so definitely give that a watch. He's also directed the 5-part ITV drama series Malpractice, which I haven't seen. Moving on to cast, Boiling Point is a little ensemble, so I've just handpicked a couple of actors to mention. First is Vanette Robinson, who plays head chef Carly. She's also played Sergeant Sally Donovan in the BBC drama Sherlock. And while we're on the subject of Sherlock, is that coming back or have they officially decided to put it to rest? I mean, after that last series, I think it's just better to just let sleeping dogs lie. Or maybe come back with a movie to just make us forget that that last series existed. Vanette Robinson also played Nicola Daniels on The A Word. She was in an episode of Black Mirror, and she played Janet on the Sky One series, The Lazarus Project. Again, one of my favourite series from last year, and that is actually coming back for a second series in November. Next on our cast roster is Stephen Graham, who plays the character Andy. He also executive produced the series and is a staple across British television. He's quite an interesting one, Stephen Graham, because he's managed to keep his feet on both sides of the pond. He's very well known in British television, but has also done a number of really big American and international film and TV as well. For example, he played Tommy in the Guy Ritchie movie Snatch, Shang in Scorsese's Gangs of London, Andrew in Shane Meadows' This Is England. Did anybody else's teacher make them rewatch This Is England over and over again, or was it just mine? He also played Mr. Wormwood in the recent Matilda the Musical movie. For TV, he played Al Capone in Boardwalk Empire, Detective Superintendent Dave Kelly on Little Boy Blue, and still plays D.I. Roy Carver in the series Code 404. Next, we have Ray Pantharki as Freeman. He played Ronnie on EastEnders. He was in it for over 150 episodes around 2003, and I believe that's one of my peak EastEnders watching moments. He also played Rav Sangar on Marcella. He also had a role in Gangs of London, which I think is where his face is most familiar from to me. Gangs of London is a great series. Series 1 is a great series, at least. If you're into quite violent drama but done well, then you should definitely add that to your watch list. And that's another one I think I've heard that is coming back for a third series. Interestingly, Ray Pantharki co-produced the 2006 London cult classic movie Kidulthood, which I didn't know until I started researching him for this. And finally on my cast list, I've added Stephen Odubola, who plays the new CDP Johnny. His first major role was in the 2016 movie Blue Story, where he played Timmy, and he has been credited in an episode of Holby City and The Sandman. So, good for him. He seems to be doing well. He's coming up. He's a rising star. Also, a face I was surprised to see in Boiling Point was Taz Skylar, who plays barman Billy and is known to me most recently for playing the role of Sanji in the Netflix live-action adaptation of the popular anime series One Piece. If you've been meaning to check out One Piece, I have done an episode on the pilot episode for that, so make sure you give that a listen. Boiling Point can be watched on BBC One and it's primetime, baby. We're talking Sunday nights at 9 p.m. But all episodes are actually available on iPlayer. And it's got a series length of 4 episodes. I'm not sure how I'm starting to... There's clearly no pleasing me. I'm not quite sure how I'm starting to feel about these short series lengths. And that's probably coming off the back of my recent pilot watch, The Continental from the World of John Wick, which was only 3 episodes. And, well, that had a plethora of other problems. Again, another one to give a listen to if you're interested. Right, so as I touched on briefly, Boiling Point, the series, is a continuation of the 2021 movie of the same name, and it stars many of the same cast members / characters. Interestingly, the feature film is based on a short film, both of which were written by Cummings and directed by Barantini. Which is nice. It's nice when people get along, so I guess they work really well together. I haven't seen Boiling Point, the movie. I did consider it when I heard that the series was coming out, but I chose not to. Not just because I didn't have time between, my full-time job, slogging through my 900-page novel and going to an NFL game at Wembley. I just thought it'd be good to put the pilot episode to the ultimate test and seeing if it stands on its own. Now for the pilot synopsis. It's an important evening for up-and-coming restaurant Point North and its head chef Carly, as she, along with her business partner, try to secure a financial investment for the restaurant. Naturally, things go from bad to worse, and we've got family emergencies and a new hire who is less than qualified, which aid in making an already difficult day even more tricky. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but I was always taught that the first 10 minutes of a feature film script and a pilot script are where you need to grip your reader / audience. By page 11, by minute 11, it's likely that somebody has lost interest. They've moved on to another script or they've switched channels. So this is where you really need to sink your claws into them and never let them go. So that's what we're going to look at, the first 10 minutes of episode 1 of Boiling Point. The first 10 minutes is non-stop. As in it's literally non-stop because it's done in a continuous shot, which means that there are no cuts. The camera just follows the drama wherever it goes. There's no cutting from one end of the room to another room. If you want to get from A to B, the camera has to follow someone or something from A to B. And I love a long take, and some popular ones include scenes in the films Goodfellas, Children of Men, the James Bond movie Spectre, and the half a dozen continuous shots that make up the entire Sam Mendes movie 1917. But back to Boiling Point. So the first 10 minutes, we start off in a kitchen and we observe the sort of banterous back and forth of a crew that feel more like a family, and it's all really harmonious. And then in walks new hire, Johnny, who is late. Apparently there was traffic, who cares? Johnny's who I would call the Gus character. So it's the character that mirrors the audience. The Gus is new and needs the rules of the playground explained to them, which then makes it an organic way to clue us, the audience, in. So yes, Johnny is the Gus character. And so Carly introduces Johnny, ergo us, to everyone in the kitchen. And we've got Freeman, the sous chef, Camille, who does starters and garnishes, Emily, who's head of pastry, Jamie, who's a demi-CDP, whatever that means, Bolton, who's on meat and fish, and then Holly and Jack, who are KPs. After a round of introductions, Carly tells Johnny to put his stuff away and jump in, help him to make the hollandaise sauce. Johnny, who we just assume is overwhelmed because he's running late and is just thrown in at the deep end, goes to put his stuff away, but we immediately smell trouble when he turns and asks his phone how to make hollandaise. When I tell you my jaw done hit the floor, as if a kitchen is not hectic enough without having somebody in there who doesn't know how to do one small job. So already we're sort of sensing trouble coming from Johnny's direction. We then have a lovely transition, and by transition I mean the camera cleverly follows somebody from the kitchen side to the main restaurant where we meet all the front of house team. There are a slew of names, positions and personalities before we then come back behind the scenes and meet Liam, who is a partner in the restaurant. He informs Carly that they need this investment deal, and the two of them look pretty damn worried. And that's about the 10/11 minute mark before we then head into the titles. And the title sequence is really short and sweet, which I appreciate it. It makes London feel like New York in the 90s with a sepia toned 8mm film feel. It's got an upbeat jazzy tune to boot. It was just really lovely. I mean, I don't know if it really matched the tone of Boiling Point, but it was nice and I'd happily watch it again. Moving on to the main characters, I'm gonna top three it based on the pilot episode and who I thought we got the most out of. First and foremost being Carly, who is the head chef, and who I would initially describe as being relatively easygoing. In that sort of first 10 minutes, she's quite jovial, she's supportive and cultivates a positive working environment with her team. She feels like the boss we all wish we had, but then we realise she's juggling quite a lot. We've got the possible closure of the restaurant, which we learn about in the first 10 minutes. We then go on to find she's got a sick mother who is a lot a bit manipulative. And also we get the sense that she's trying to rise to and meet certain expectations that have been put on her. To me, it feels like Carly needs to sort out her priorities before they prioritize themselves for her. Yeah, she's got a lot going on, but there's something incredibly unreliable about her. And when someone's unreliable, we don't know if we can trust them. And to be honest as well with Carly, I'm not sure if we're supposed to be rooting for her. Next on the list is Johnny, and he's the new CDP. There's not much to say about him. He's got a quite nervous disposition, which makes sense, as he doesn't know how to do his job. We aren't quite clear about his motivations for basically conning everybody, but he's a try at least, so we have to give him credit for that, maybe. And I think it'll be interesting to find out what his motivations are, where he's come from to get to the point he is in now, and why he wanted to work at Point North. And lastly, on the character list, I've chosen Andy. And through a series of conversations throughout the pilot episode, we learned that Andy used to run a restaurant where the majority of the kitchen crew we meet at Point North used to work. He's recently had a heart attack and possibly surgery if my medical skills from the University of Grey's Anatomy are still up to scratch. He's definitely bitter about the position he's in now, which is sitting around all day in his flat eating bad food, coughing, wheezing, and watching pool or the snooker, potato. And it seems like he's on the verge of giving up altogether, but he's holding a grudge against his former crew and specifically Carly. And though there's a level of animosity surrounding Andy, I wouldn't necessarily call him the antagonist. To be honest, I wouldn't call anybody the antagonist in this series so far, although I would argue that every character is a little bit self-destructive, so it's a bit of a two-sided coin, this one. Moving on to my favourite moment from episode 1, which would be the opening sequence. I freaking love a single take, and it's not just that sort of urgency and the way it literally forces you to not turn away from the screen. It's then paired quite nicely with the end of the episode where everything eventually descends into chaos. And so you just sort of keep thinking back to that earlier 10 minutes and that earlier opening sequence where everything, in a sense, flows. So yeah, that was definitely my favourite moment. There's something quite beautifully rustic about a long take, and I think it works well with the hecticness of a kitchen. The thing I didn't like, I don't really want to get into because it feels more like a personal view of character choices. Okay, fine. There's this one moment where Johnny, the new hire, is taking tender stem broccoli off the grill. He drops one on the floor, reaches down, and adds it to the plate. This plate then goes out and is served to a customer. Yes. I'm sorry, but how can anyone be so stupid? Like, I cannot fathom the absolute stupidity in that action. I mean, they didn't pick you up off the street to come and work in this restaurant. You must have some, if not skill in the kitchen, some like good old fashioned common sense. And I will give the fact that it worked for the wow factor, but at the same time, it just read as completely unbelievable. Just because you don't know how to make hollandaise sauce doesn't mean you're an idiot, you know? I'm like, would you pick up food on the floor at home? I mean, you might do that at home, but do you know where you don't do it? In the kitchen of a restaurant. I mean, like I said, it seems so unbelievable. Maybe it's less to do with the realms of believability and more to do with the fact that I eat out a lot. And the last thing I want to think is the kitchen staff have scooped my steak off the floor and yelled 3-second rule before serving it to me. I mean, I just can't. Stepping away from the pilot episode and looking at the possible series arc, I'm not quite sure where it's going to go. I mean, there's definitely going to be something to do with if it will be a financial struggle to keep the restaurant going, as well as the development of all of the characters' personal arcs, you know, their lives outside of the kitchen. Of course, with Andy, we need to know whether or not he'll eventually make amends with his former kitchen staff. And of course, will Johnny progress his skills in the kitchen as a chef, or will he be arrested for crimes against hygiene? Coming back to the pilot episode and the end of episode hook, somebody key has walked out, and the question is, will they return? And for me, that's the only real hook for tuning into episode 2. Arguably, the other points about where the series is going to go could be another factor of whether or not you'll keep watching. But in terms of going from episode to episode, will the person who walked out come back? And if they don't come back, what does that mean for Point North and the team? Overall, episode 1 of Boiling Point was intense as hell and occasionally uncomfortable to watch. Did I breathe? No. What made it all the more engaging was Johnny, the new CDP. It was really clever to make the audience in on the secret from the start that he had no idea what he was doing. Because trust me, the way I was yelling at the screen, I would have ratted him out straight away in real life. It was cringe, it made us more engaged and pulled us into the chaos, and I still can't get over the tender stem broccoli moment, so that worked. Johnny aside, there was a nice mix and breakup of the mounting chaos going on in the kitchen with the professional face that people had to keep front of house. As I round up, I will say, looking at Boiling Point from film to series, I didn't feel too lost. I did have a few questions throughout, but nothing that felt like a gaping hole in the plot, just standard pilot questions that would eventually be answered across subsequent episodes. So I'd say episode 1 did a really good job on that front. Now, in terms of whether or not I will continue to watch the next 3 episodes that make up the series of Boiling Point, pause for dramatic effect. No. To be honest, I didn't like anybody. I didn't like anybody. I just didn't like anybody at all. They were all so awful. And I really couldn't understand anybody's motivations, even Carly and her family emergency, which came across as a more raw and realistic moment compared to the craziness of the job. I couldn't understand the decisions she chose to make throughout the episode. They all just felt silly to me. And yeah, I just didn't like her. I didn't like anybody. I didn't like Andy. I didn't like Johnny. The front of house staff, their tete-a-tete. I wasn't kikiing with them. No. I did enjoy the food. It made me very, very hungry and made me want to immediately go to a lovely restaurant to eat out, where I will, of course, not be ordering the tender stem broccoli. Now that we've hashed out the fundamental principles, will you be giving the pilot episode a watch, or have you already binged all 4 episodes of Boiling Point? Alternatively, have you watched the Boiling Point movie, and do you intend to watch the series continuation? If you watched the movie and the series, would you recommend going to watch the movie first? Let me know over on Twitter/X @PilotPrinciple, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next episode.